On today's show, Hendrix Lapierre has been dominating at 5-on-5. And what about the young guys? Next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the past 4 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, what about the young guys, the new guys on this team? This team has a lot of established players, but there has been some new additions this season. What about Declan Chisholm, Ryan Leonard, and Justin Sortif? I'll talk about that a bit later. I'll talk about Sheldon Rempal being placed on waivers. But just to get it going here, talking about a guy that has a lot at stake for his future with the Capitals, a guy that has a lot at stake for his future in the NHL. And I'm talking about Hendrix Lapierre. The Capitals signed him to a bridge deal, a prove-it deal, trying to retread that tire one more time in hopes that he can finally catch on. And when I say finally catch on, there's a lot of lines that you could draw to Connor McMichael. We saw with that from him before as well, is that he would get an opportunity. It wasn't sustained. He'd go down to Hershey. Well, Connor McMichael has put down roots with the Capitals. He is an established player on this team. But as far as Hendrix Lapierre is concerned, we've seen glimpses of greatness. To start this season, the feeling was he was going to be the answer at the third line center position. Yeah, I know, deja vu again. But the Capitals and Spencer Carberry seem to be, a little bit non-committal, maybe wanting to experiment, as we have seen Justin Sortif get some reps in at that third line center position here as well. So let's dive into it. What is the latest with Hendrix Lapierre? And is he the long-term answer? Does he have a future with the Capitals? So let's talk about it. And what we saw in the most recent game, he didn't score against Seattle, but man, the process numbers were ridiculous on him. During his shifts, the Caps were absolutely owning play. Way more shot attempts for, way more scoring chances for, and high danger chances were lopsided. And I think that, he wants to play center, kind of like Connor McMichael. But I think that what I noticed from Hendrix Lapierre is it seems to flow a little bit more easily for him. He's not thinking about it as much when he's playing on the wing. And at the end of the day, I don't care where he plays. If you ask Hendrix Lapierre if he had his druthers where he'd rather play, of course he's going to say the center position. But at the end of the day, I think he wants a role. He wants a job in the National Hockey League, more specifically the Capitals. And what we have seen from him as of late is, encouraging. He started a lot of his shifts outside the offensive zone and still managed to create chances. And there were some chances, and people were talking about as well as, he didn't want to end up in the press box, because I think that once he gets yanked out of the lineup, I think that's when things get difficult. When he's a healthy scratch, I think that, even though he has adapted a new attitude this year, I think that will crumble in a hurry if he spends time watching it up in the press box. But we don't need to go to that. As of right now, I think he is showing signs of improvement, and a lot of that is just putting your aces in your places. What we have seen from him, Lapierre, McMichael, and Wilson, And that's kind of what it was sketched out today, the notes from practice there. And what we very well might see, there's a lot of balls in the air there as well, as far as Pierre-Luc Dubois is concerned. But those are the kind of plays that don't always show up on the highlight reel, but they change momentum. I'm talking about one faceoffs, those kind of things. He recorded multiple individual shot attempts and he threw a hit. Those are endearing things to Spencer Carberry. That the one thing that Spencer's good at is he can detect when you're mailing it in, and if he detects that, you're not going to have too much time in the lineup. So I think he's doing a lot of the little things right now. Like I said, he recorded multiple individual shot attempts, won faceoffs, threw a hit, getting involved in the play. That if he's not finding the back of the net on a regular basis, and we haven't witnessed that yet, that he is endearing himself in different ways. But like I said, those are the kind of things that don't always show up on the highlight reel. The secondary things, of course it's goals and it's assists, but it's the little things as well, changing the momentum. And Coach Carberry mentioned that the bench shortened in the third period and Lapierre didn't get as many shifts. So we've got to remember context as well. So I think that he has taken some steps forward. Of course, I think that he still has a lot to prove. What I've said about Hendrix the entire time is that I want to see him after 10, 12, let's say 15 games and see where he's at. Because the one thing I know is that he's taken up a roster spot over someone that's in Hershey right now that maybe should be on the big team. So he definitely needs to bring it. But my read on the whole situation is around Lapierre is moving from a project to a reliable contributor. And, those projects are, sometimes they're worthwhile. Sometimes they pay dividends. Sometimes they don't. Oftentimes you see players brought in on professional tryouts as projects, and sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't. See Jacob Vrana from last year. Like, wasn't that such a great story, right? That, oh my God, Vrana's back in the 2018 vibes. It didn't pan out. So I think that, Hendrix Lapierre is transitioning from that kind of player. He's transitioning from, a guy that needs a lot of work to not finding the back of the net on a regular basis, but he is a guy that's contributing. So that's the big thing. And for the Capitals, depth like that is everything. So the question I'm asking myself, will his usage increase? Will the coaches trust him more in crucial moments? And if the answer to that question is yes, that's great. If not, there's still a ton of upside when he's used smartly. And when you take a look at it, if he does want to get a sweater on a night in and night out basis in the National Hockey League, and you got to believe that he does, because, I don't know if he wants to see what's behind door number 2. That, if he doesn't sustain in the National Hockey League, the track record is there of inconsistency. I'm hoping that he's putting those days in the rearview mirror of inconsistency. And what we have seen here as of late, at least in the last game against Seattle, is encouraging. I'm not saying he's out of the woods yet, but what I am saying is that he is showing promise. And ultimately, this is a kid that earned a spot on the roster and broke camp with his team in hopes that he was going to be a reliable contributor. And I don't want this to be the same story that we saw from him last year, that he played here for a bit, gets reassigned, because it's a bit more tricky for Hendrix Lapierre this time around. But at the end of the day, we're hoping for the best. And ultimately, a lot of his fate is in his hands. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about what about the new guys, the youth on this team. I'll break it all down straight ahead. Let's be real here. Making excuses doesn't solve anything. We've all heard it before. It's just stress. I'm tired, or it happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performances, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support. And that's where Rougiette comes in. Rougiette.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED designed to help you take Stop making excuses and start making moves. So live your best life and do that with Rougiette. If prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly straight to your door. The process is fast, simple, and private, and it's all handled by real doctors. It's about confidence, connection, and getting back to the moments that matter. So start making more of those special moments today. Visit rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL to get 15% off your order. That's rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnNHL so they know we sent you. Rougiette, stop making excuses and start making moves. Hockey season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real. Getting tickets can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your favorite team. That's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives you fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. I love that what you see is what you pay. No hidden fees at checkout. Plus, I could see exactly what my view looked like before I bought the tickets with their in-app seat view feature. Now, listen, I'm going to see the Capitals play in December in St. Paul, and you better believe I am using Game Time, and you should too. Take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So talking about the new guys this season, and it's not too often that we get to talk about new players, that it's kind of the old guard for the longest time. So let's do a check-in on some of the players and see where they're at. And, it's exciting, right, that to add some fresh blood, if you will, to this team. So let's dive into that in the next segment here, talking about Declan Chisholm, a player that the Capitals traded for and acquired from the Minnesota Wild as a depth piece on the blue line. And as it turns out, it does appear as though he will be in the mix versus Columbus, as Rasmus Sandin is out day to day. And it's a good feeling. It really is. I mean, there's Dylan McIlrath in there as well, but I feel more confident with a guy like Declan Chisholm in the mix than, let's say, Alex Alexiev. So first up, let's talk about the man himself, Declan Chisholm. And the one thing that really popped off the page for me in the preseason was his shot. And not a forward, he's not a center or a wing. He's a defender, a blue liner, and his shot is next level. He's got a couple of games under his belt so far, but I like the poise. He's not overexerting himself, and the shot looks flawless. It doesn't look labored. It doesn't look like it's overly thought out. And what I'm noticing is he's making the smart plays, the simple plays, and that is exactly what you want from a young defenseman trying to earn trust. And all he has done so far since he's been on the Capitals is knock it out of the park. From the preseason to present day, Declan Chisholm has been an excellent addition. And, God forbid any of the blue liners are out for an extended period of time. But if they are, I feel confident with Declan Chisholm in the mix. He's logged around 14 minutes a night in those outings, mostly in the defensive zone. He's picked up a secondary assist in his debut. Now, that's a small sample. And, like I talked about in yesterday's show about Ryan Leonard, and I'll talk about him here in a bit as well, is that we get kind of a lay of the land, or a bit of a finger to the air to see what direction these players are blowing in. And all things considered, I think that Declan Chisholm is trending well. But like I said, a small sample size, and I get it, but this early return says he's steady. What's common about a lot of these blue liners? Not flashy, just solid. And honestly, that's a win for a depth D-man trying to carve out his role. And, you take a look at it that, playing with the Wild and playing there. And, to be honest with you, not a name that I was super familiar with before the Capitals acquired him. But what I have researched and what I have seen in the eye test so far, I think he fits the bill. So let's check in. I talked about him yesterday as well, but where's Ryan Leonard at? There's some intriguing things here, and it'll be interesting to see how it fans out here. If you take a look earlier in the day, Sammy Silver from the Hockey News says that Ryan Leonard on the third line, right wing, which is expected, it's listed as Protas, Sortif, and Leonard. But taking a look at the line combos, and this was on the Daily Faceoff, and this originated, the source, 10:52 Central Daylight Time, source Tom Galiti. We take a look at it, and it has Ryan Leonard playing the second line right wing. Again, Pierre-Luc Dubois has an exclamation, which means that he is questionable for the game on Friday night. But hey, is someone out there listening to my show out there that's within the Capitals organization? I said in yesterday's show that I'd like to see Ryan Leonard get in some more work and not necessarily playing on the third line. So I don't know if this is correct. I'm just telling you what I see. This is the Daily Faceoff. This is from Tom Galiti, who covers the NHL. And the Daily Faceoff is a notable website and publication. They have Tom Wilson listed on the third line right wing. So if this is an error, I don't know. Again, all I know is what I'm seeing here earlier in the day. Like I said, Leonard, third line right wing, but the most recent posting I see here is Leonard on the second line right wing. In any event, if that is the case, that'll be interesting. I think that originates from primarily Pierre-Luc Dubois in the mix, because on the Daily Faceoff one here, he is on the second. Pierre-Luc Dubois is the second line center, of course. So it's going to be a storyline to follow. And of course, I will have you guys covered the entire way on Locked On Capitals. But checking in with Ryan Leonard. But it's worth looping back to him because he's technically a part of the newcomer group. He joined the Capitals in the latter part of last season, the one empty netter goal. But this season, yeah, I think he's starting to catch on. And what's cool to see is how he's progressing just beyond the offense. And, that's the thing. Spencer Carberry said this is a guy that's got to learn to fail, that this isn't the NCAA, that this isn't, the junior level, or this isn't, the international stage, rather, that you're playing against some of the best players, if not the best players in the entire world. And that's okay. You're not going to knock it out of the park every night. And Carberry mentioned they're judging him by his wall play, his puck possessions, his reads without the puck. And that's something that spoke about more and more nowadays as well, even for forwards, is being responsible with the puck and without the puck. And he's already checking boxes most rookies struggle with. And for someone who's still learning to handle the grind, he is adapting fast. Ultimately, that's why he's a first-round pick, right? That, if they're a less than player, they don't have that skill set. It's kind of an expectation when you're taken in the first round, like Ryan Leonard, that you're going to have a good skill set. And he is showing growth and encouragement. And that's a major plus for the team's long-term picture. All right, next here, let's talk about Justin Sortif. And, playing the wing, that's where he's been penciled in. We've seen him on the fourth line on the right wing. But one of the things that Spencer Carberry said, his natural position, of course, is the center position. And he plays that much better there. And they want to get a good look at him and straight line bursts of speed. And that was apparent. When you see him out on the ice, the guy can book it. And I think we're just starting to tap in to the kind of player that Justin Sortif is in. Again, really early take here. Sortif here earlier in the day, third line center, of course. That is what we have seen there as of late. But in the daily face-off here, reciting back that, and Tom Gliddy, he is back on the fourth line right wing. So an interesting storyline to follow. Again, follow the bouncing ball. It all emanates around Pierre-Luc Dubois, and if in fact he will or will not be in the mix. Again, he was in practice, Pierre-Luc Dubois, that is today, for the first time in a contact jersey. So an intriguing, an exciting storyline to follow. That is for sure, to see how this all materializes. But Justin Sortif, he's been working hard on that fourth line, and we've seen him on the third line center as well, but playing with Duhaime and Dowd, promising. And look, the numbers actually like him so far. Even strength shot share above 60%, high danger chances over 70. And there's a reason that Chris Patrick, even though we didn't understand it at the time, gave up, count them, 2 draft picks that I would be willing to bet you had to do a Google search on who in the world is Justin Sortif. But all things considered, I think he has shown promise. I guess time will tell on him as well. But talking about his percentages there, that's impressive considering his role in competition. One of the things that Chris Patrick said is that this guy is going to be on the NHL team this year. And that's quite a statement, because if he didn't, that would make him look, maybe not the smartest guy in the world. But what we have seen, I agree with that. I think he's an NHL player, and I think he's still, if you can believe it, he's admitted in interviews that he's a shyer guy, that he's taken a while to warm up, but he feels comfortable playing in Washington now. And with that comfort, that confidence, like I said, I think we're just starting to tap into what kind of player he is. But what we have seen, he's been physical, responsible, and gives you that extra spark when the fourth line hits the ice, or like I said, the third line center. Now, he hasn't really found the scoring touch yet, but the effort is there. And a lot like Ryan Leonard, I think that once he finds the back of the net, it's going to flow more easily. He's smart and he's coachable. Carberry even floated the idea of playing him more at center, like I said, and I think that it all depends on what happens. What do they do with Lapierre? What do they do with Connor McMichael? That, just like I said, to start the season, that we have things sketched out. Do it in pencil with one of those big erasers, because everything is subject to change. But big picture here, I like what I've seen from the new younger guys on this team. And it'll be exciting to see how they progress as the season goes along. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about the Hershey Bears, the Capitals organization, putting Sheldon Rempal on waivers. What does that mean for Rempal? What does it mean for the Bears? I'll discuss straight ahead. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how using FanDuel gives me so many different ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, and even followed the live lines during the game. And the thing that I absolutely love about FanDuel, and I think you will as well, is that on any given Sunday or Monday or Thursday, you've already got vested interest, right? If you're a Commanders fan or, say, a Ravens fan. But say you want vested interest in all of the games, including the Commanders and Ravens game, open up the FanDuel app, put $5 down. All of a sudden, those games got that much more exciting. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today to get started. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals, like the videos, and comment anything down below. And also join the Locked On Capitals Insiders. Yes, there's more and more of them every day, Capitals news delivered directly to your phone. A text message. No going to Twitter or this or that or the other thing. A text message from yours truly. You can text me back. I'd love to talk Capitals hockey with you. Check out more information in the show notes. So in the last segment of today's show, we're talking about the news that Sheldon Rempal is being placed on waivers. And why? Well, because he is generating quite a bit of interest over in Russia in the KHL. And the Capitals up here is that they want to honor his wishes. So let's talk about the latest surrounding Rempal in the final segment of today's show. And we've got some pretty interesting news about Sheldon Rempal, and kind of surprising to a certain extent, the waiver thing, and ultimately was he going to clear and join the Hershey Bears? Well, the Capitals placed him on waivers, and it looks like he might be headed back to the KHL. Let's take a step back and talk about Rempal's journey, because there was quite a bit of excitement at the time that he was going to be joining the Capitals organization, the Bears, and what that meant, the possibility that, he might even make the big team. As we know, wasn't the case. This past summer, the Caps signed him to a 1-year, 2-way contract after an outstanding season in Russia. And you're going to have to forgive me. These are Russian names here. I don't speak Russian fluently, so give me a break. I'm going to say it slow. He played for Salavyet Yuliev Ufa, and he put up 61 points in 68 games last season. And that is ultimately, I think, what the Capitals saw. And there was an opportunity, and they said, hey, let's take a flyer on this guy and see if he's a fit. And those numbers, if you take a look at them, that's pretty impressive, ranking him 4th in the league in scoring. And that's the tough part, I guess, the bitter pill for the Capitals to swallow, as that was a nice guy or a good player to have developing, down in Hershey. He's a little bit further along than some of the other players in Hershey. So for this situation to play itself out the way it did, not less than stellar, shall we say. I liked what I saw from him in the preseason, but hockey's a business, just like the Vinny Iorio thing. You got to learn to accept it. These players are here for a minute and gone the next. And don't forget, during the playoffs, he led the entire league in points with 21 in 19 games, despite his team not making the final. So coming into the Caps training camp, expectations were high. I spoke about him on the show as well. That there's a possibility. Would he be a good option for the Capitals? We knew that the roster was full. Lapierre wasn't a lock at making the team back then. Sonny Milano wasn't a lock on making the team back then. And, a bit of a revisionist. Was it the right thing? Sonny Milano has not exactly popped off the page during the regular season. Yes, the regular season, he played well, but remember that was the preseason. Maybe that's a lack of opportunity. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, would the Capitals have been better hanging on? I mean, I know that he wanted to be placed on waivers here, but should they have done a better job to try to shoehorn him onto the big team? I guess that's a question there. And so coming to the Caps training camp, expectations were high. And even Coach Carberry said, had every argument to say he could play in the NHL right now. He looked good. And yet after camp, he was waived and sent down to Hershey. It is what it is. Hendrix Lapierre had a good camp. Sonny Milano had a good camp. And Hendrix Lapierre has been good, a bit better here as of late, but I don't think as good as we had perceived in the preseason. Same goes for Sonny Milano. And yet a guy like Rempal, who put up big numbers last season, could be back onto his next adventure, heading back over to Russia. And a solid start in Hershey with 2 points in 4 games, skating the Bears' top line with Crystal and Smallman. It's like he was at the top of the heap down in Hershey, but this is a guy, he was getting a lot of offers, like the teams I mentioned and more teams that I will talk about here in a minute, that it's difficult. But it's clear there's strong interest from multiple KHL teams, and Rempal might want to jump at a much better opportunity. The KHL teams reportedly interesting include his old club, Salavet Yuliyev, Ufa, Dynamo Moscow, CSKA Moscow, Tractor Chelyabinsk, Metalaburg Gorsk, and Akabors Zavan. Again, you'll have to forgive me as I'm not Russian, but those are the teams. And if you are a fan of the KHL, and I know that I have some people that listen and watch the show from Russia, as I've heard on YouTube, you'll have to cut me a break there. But if you are from there, I think that you can understand the teams that are showing interest. But the Tractor Chelyabinsk is leading the pack with an offer rumored to be around 150 million rubles a season. That roughly translates to 1.84 million bucks. That's more than 4 times his AHL salary if he stayed in Hershey. So I think that money is a motivator. I think that there is a comfort level for him playing over there. And ultimately, I think why he's in the position that he's in. So you can see why going back overseas is tempting. And if Rempal signs with Tractor, or any of these big KHL teams, it leaves a big hole on the Hershey Bears roster. Like I said, playing with Crystal, playing with Smallman, that's going to present another opportunity for someone else, but still not the best. You take a look at the Bears are still a young and developing team, and losing a top line winger like Rempal means they have some adjustments ahead. So for the Caps, this waiver and mutual contract termination frees up a roster spot. But at the end of the day, of course, I would have preferred for him to stay in Hershey. Or, if, like I said, we could have found a way to shoehorn him into the big team. It also shows the difficult balance. NHL teams must strike between, developing players, managing contracts, and roster limits. It's just a reminder, I guess you could say, that hockey careers can be really fluid nowadays, especially like you saw the exodus of players that went from Hershey overseas, Europe, these kind of areas, with leagues like the KHL offering competitive salaries and significant playing roles. It'll be interesting to see how Hershey adjusts. It'll be interesting to see where Rempal lands. But at the end of the day, it's the nature of doing business in the National Hockey League. Unfortunate, I guess, is what I'm going to say. But at the end of the day, that does seem apparent that he's on to his next NHL adventure. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are ultimately what makes the show successful. And now for your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.